You know that knot in your stomach? The one that tightens when you think about the future.
Hmm.
Like, will you ever feel truly secure?
Yeah.
Booking a home, that dream feels like it's just slipping away for so many.
It really does.
And saving enough for a comfortable future. It's just this constant nagging worry, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a feeling that the kind of financial stability maybe our parents' generation had, well, it feels out of reach now.
Yeah, just out of reach.
And that feeling, that anxiety you're talking about, it mirrors a real shift we're seeing.
Okay.
The whole economic landscape, the traditional ideas of what safe means financially, they're being seriously challenged.
Like money in the bank, owning a house,
And,
the basics.
exactly. Those cornerstones we relied on, they're under pressure, especially for, younger folks.
Uh-huh.
And if you look at real wages, what people actually earn after you account for rising costs, well, they haven't really gone up meaningfully in decades.
It's pretty disheartening, really. You feel like you're doing everything right, putting in the work, but the finish line just keeps getting pushed further back. It leaves you feeling a bit lost, maybe even, I don't know, angry. Definitely anxious.
Understandably so, yeah.
So let's talk about something that might sound, well, a bit alarming, maybe.
Okay.
But it's a perspective based on what we're actually seeing right now. The idea that we could be facing a huge reshaping of, well, everything financially within maybe the next 6 years.
It is a stark outlook, I get that. It sounds dramatic,
It does.
but it comes from looking at these really big macro-level economic trends.
Hmm.
I've spent a lot of time analyzing these shifts, trying to figure out not just where we're headed, but also where the weaknesses are. And crucially, where potential opportunities might pop up for people trying to navigate all this.
Okay, 6 years. That feels, well, it feels really soon, actually.
It's a relatively short time frame in the grand scheme of things, yes.
So what's driving this? What kind of fundamental changes are you seeing that could lead to such a massive shift in our financial world?
Well, at its heart, the system we've all gotten used to is just carrying an enormous amount of weight. Think about global debt, government debt, corporate debt, personal debt.
Right.
It's reached levels that, frankly, many analysts argue just aren't sustainable in the long run.
Hmm. So managing that debt becomes the main thing.
It becomes a huge preoccupation, yeah. And it often gets in the way of the kind of real economic growth that actually helps everyday people. You see when interest rates go up, right?
Mhm.
That puts a squeeze on borrowers, slows things down.
So that standard advice we always heard, keep your money safe in the bank, invest in property because it's always stable, that's being questioned now
Right.
by this bigger picture.
Precisely. I mean, think about it. If the money sitting in your savings account is slowly losing its buying power because of inflation or other pressures,
Yeah,
then the idea that it's a completely safe place starts to look a bit shaky, doesn't it?
it does.
And home ownership, which was the key way for previous generations to build wealth, it's just become incredibly expensive compared to what people actually earn. The numbers really show it.
Hmm.
If you compare a young adult today to someone their age, say 30 or 40 years ago, you see much lower rates of owning a home, sometimes even lower rates of living independently.
People feel that, though. They sense that the path their parents took just isn't, well, it isn't as open anymore.
Exactly. They feel it.
It's almost like the rules change, but nobody sent out the memo.
Huh. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And I know so many people feel that frustration, working harder than ever, but just not making the same kind of progress. This idea that, we might be the first generation to actually be worse off financially. That's a heavy thought.
It's a very significant concern. It really is. And it underlines why just sort of following the old playbook might not get you the same results anymore.
Right.
The traditional strategies, they just aren't necessarily working as well in this kind of environment. If you look at, say, the historical returns from established investments compared to some of the newer things emerging, the difference can be pretty stark. Established markets might give you steady growth, sure, but maybe not enough to really move the needle on your financial situation when everything else is getting more expensive.
This is where it gets really interesting. This idea that the tried and true investment paths might not actually be the best way forward now.
Especially if you're younger, with a longer time horizon ahead of you, the numbers just aren't always as compelling as they used to be.
How so?
Well, real estate, for example. In many places, it's just not the wealth-building machine it was when prices were much lower relative to incomes.
Right. Catching up feels impossible sometimes.
It can feel that way. And the stock market, like the S&P 500. Yes, it offers returns over the long term, But those returns might struggle to significantly outpace the rising cost of living and help you hit major financial goals quickly enough.
Hmm.
Even things like gold, often seen as a safe haven in uncertain times. Its track record for substantial growth isn't always that strong.
Okay, so if these traditional routes are maybe less effective or facing headwinds, as you say, where are the potential opportunities? You mentioned you were seeing some possibilities earlier.
Yeah, so one area that I think presents really compelling opportunities, particularly for people willing to learn
Mm.
and take a longer view, is the crypto asset space.
Ah, crypto. Okay.
Assets like Bitcoin,
Yeah.
Ethereum. They've shown really significant growth potential over the past decade or so, often far outpacing traditional investments.
Like, how significant are we talking?
Well, just as one example, Bitcoin has shown, very substantial average annual growth since it started, even with all the ups and downs of volatility we've seen.
Uh-huh.
And what's really fascinating is the technology underneath it, all the blockchain.
Wow, that is a huge difference compared to the sort of single-digit returns you might hope for more conventional stuff. It almost sounds, well, too good to be true. I can see why people might be cautious.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep.
That skepticism is totally understandable. And honestly, it's healthy. You should approach any investment, especially newer ones, with caution and do your homework.
Right.
The volatility in crypto is undeniable. We've seen massive price swings, big corrections. That's part of the territory right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the underlying technology, blockchain,
Yeah.
it has implications that go way beyond just digital money.
Yeah.
It's really about creating potentially more secure, more transparent, more decentralized ways to handle value and information.
How so? Like, what does that mean practically?
Well, imagine systems where you have more direct control over your digital stuff, your assets, without needing as many intermediaries.
Mm-hmm.
Think about verifying ownership or tracking goods more efficiently.
Okay, and you see this technology, blockchain, as being a major force for change in these next, say, 6 years.
I absolutely do. We're already seeing it being adopted in various industries,
Hmm.
improving supply chains, managing digital identity, tokenizing real-world assets. The potential for really fundamental changes there, and for individuals. It offers a chance to potentially participate in the growth of this new technological wave in ways that traditional finance hasn't always allowed, maybe with lower barriers to entry, and yes, the possibility of significant growth.
So, for someone listening, maybe in their 20s or 30s, feeling like they're already behind the curve, your perspective is they should seriously look into this emerging area.
Look, for younger people who have that longer time horizon, time to learn, time to potentially ride out volatility, understanding this space, and maybe carefully allocating a portion of their portfolio to well-researched crypto assets,
Mm-hmm.
things like Bitcoin, Ethereum, maybe some other solid projects, it could be a really significant factor in their financial future.
Uh-huh.
The potential for growth in the coming years as this tech matures and gets more integrated, it seems considerable.
It's a real mental shift, though, isn't it? We're often taught, play it safe, stick with what you know. Embracing something like crypto can feel like a big leap, especially when you see those scary headlines about market crashes.
It can feel like a leap. But look, calculated risk is part of any investment strategy. Nobody gets significant returns without taking on some level of risk.
Sure.
The key is education, understanding what you're investing in, the potential upsides, and the potential downsides. For younger people, arguably, the bigger risk might actually be sticking only to traditional assets and potentially missing out on what could be a major period of wealth creation driven by this technological shift.
So, sort of the risk of not participating.
Potentially, yes. It's about taking that long-term view and trying not to get spooked by the short-term noise, the daily price swings.
Okay, so let's bring this back to you listening right now. If these next 6 years really could bring these kinds of major financial changes, and if the old paths, the traditional ways, might not get you where you want to go in terms of security and growth, maybe it's time to, well, rethink your approach.
It probably is time for a review at least.
You've laid out a case here for looking at alternatives, especially crypto, highlighting that potential for pretty significant growth, maybe faster than we'd expect elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's crucial to stress, again, this isn't about just jumping blindly into something volatile. Not at all.
Right.
It's about seeing the big picture, the fundamental changes potentially happening globally, and then exploring new avenues that might actually align better with that changing world.
Yeah.
The track record of assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum, when you compare them to traditional stuff, it's just a very compelling data point to consider.
And for those of you who are younger listening to this, the message seems pretty clear. Focus on boosting your income however you can. Commit to always learning, especially about these new areas, and maybe be open to taking some calculated risks in these newer asset classes.
Exactly. The world's changing fast, and your financial strategy might need to evolve right along with it.
Which brings up a really important question for you, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Do your current financial plans, your strategies, do they really line up with the kind of future we're talking about?
That's the key question. Are you actually positioned to navigate these potential shifts and maybe even find opportunities within them? Think about the challenges we discussed with savings, with real estate.
Uh-huh. And really weigh the potential of these alternatives. That idea of accessibility, maybe lower barriers to entry, and the high growth potential you mentioned in crypto.
What steps might you need to think about taking just to adapt,
Yeah.
to make sure you're not potentially left behind if things really do shift dramatically?
Right.
And just as a final thought, looking at another angle, it's interesting, isn't it? In this increasingly digital world we're building,
Mm.
there's also this growing pull towards real-world experiences,
Yeah.
towards community connection.
Yeah, that's true. A bit of a paradox.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's maybe another trend worth keeping an eye on as everything continues to evolve around us.
Definitely some important things to chew on there as we look towards these potentially transformative next few years.
See you soon.